Now, Aaliyah was an American singer, actress, dancer, and model, born January 16th of 1979. She has been credited for helping to redefine contemporary R&B, pop, and hip-hop, earning the nickname the Princess of R&B and Queen of Urban Pop. So she was born in Brooklyn, raised, however, in Detroit, and had gained her recognition at a very young age, at only being 10 years old. This is when she appeared on the television show Star Search and performed in concert alongside Gladys Knight. At the age of only 12, she had signed with Jive Records, and her uncle Barry Hankerson's Blackground Records. So Barry had introduced her to R. Kelly, who had became her then mentor, as well as lead songwriter and producer for her debut album, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. The album had sold 3 million copies in the United States and was certified double platinum by the Recording Industry Association of America. After allegations of an illegal marriage with R. Kelly, Aaliyah had ended her contract with Jive and signed with Atlantic Records. Now, just to touch on that very, very briefly, if I'm correct, I think she was 15 when she got married to him, did not have approval from her parents, and I think that it was brought on because she was potentially pregnant. We'll confirm later on, but I'm pretty sure that that is accurate. And if what we know of R. Kelly, especially now, not surprising, sadly. So Aaliyah had worked with the record producers Timbaland and Missy Elliott, I love her, for her second album, One in a Million, where she sold 3 million copies and more than 8 million worldwide. In 2000, Aaliyah had appeared in her first film, Romeo Must Die. She contributed to the film's soundtrack, which spawned the single Try Again. So she was a very up-and-coming star. She was very popular, great at what she did, and honestly very hardworking. Clearly, she was always going. However, on August 25th of 2001, she had actually died at the age of 22 in an airplane accident in the Bahamas when the badly overloaded, this is what Wikipedia says, okay, aircraft she was traveling in had crashed shortly after takeoff, killing all 9 that were aboard the plane. The pilot was later found to have traces of cocaine in his alcohol, and his body was not qualified to fly the aircraft designated for the flight. Aaliyah's family later filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the aircraft operator, Black Hawk International Airways, which was settled out of court. Decades since, she still has a very successful legacy, but there is a lot of gray area behind what actually happened on that flight. Why did she pass? Was it all a tragedy? Or was there something more going on behind the scenes? We're going to explore that today. So 3 or 4 of the more popular theories we're going to be going over today, starting with the pilot. So Aaliyah had spent the last days of her life around all of her loved ones. So, the popular theory is that Aaliyah was a blood sacrifice, and that her death, with many citing Jay-Z, Beyonce, and Dash, was the main parties that had sort of benefited from this. So it was believed that Aaliyah wanted to get out of society, the society, like the Illuminati, as she was in it, and maybe even reveal the truth about saw her entourage carrying her asleep onto the plane despite her protests and her suddenly being knocked out. He remembers the unforgettable sound of the aircraft crashing to the ground. A member of her team, hearing of this information, said that in learning that she did not want to get on that plane for someone like her who was close to her, and many other people in her team that were as well, consider it more closure absolutely